Hello, Bookish Brigade. Tonight, with some common interest in astute but engaging literary commentary and a mission to amplify diversity in comic books and more, these reading rebels, Keisha and Bri, started the Pink Riot Comic Show. Better known as the Blurred Library and Bri's Bookish, their appearance tonight marks the end of the Books and Bounty graphic novel spotlight. They will help us stack our end of year TBR piles and check off those last minute holiday gifts with reading recommendations from 2024, plus what to look out for in the next year. We'll also continue to explore the primary differences between graphic novels, comic books, and a little bit of manga. And stick around after the intermission as I announce our next giveaway winner and open up some book mail. But first, a little announcement. Some big news coming in 2025 for Books and Bounty. Ink and Inspiration is a curated series of intimate bookish events developed by Books and Bounty with partners Elevation Global Media Group, Notre Maison, and JNF Enterprises. After surviving the politics of 2024 and what will soon be Trump's second inauguration, I want the first Ink and Inspiration on February 8th, 2025, to be a call to action to writers, authors, and those who support them. It should remind us of our power while motivating us to continue to do the work. There will be three main panel sessions, an author signing block, and a culminating workshop for writers or creatives, plus a bookish market with rotating vendors. There will be a small but brief application and small registration fees for both in person and in virtual vendors, and tickets will be sold per session or you can buy a day pass. All right, everyone, let's get started. I'm going to bring in Keisha and Bri now. So I'm here with the co hosts of the Pink Riot Comic Show. Keisha, better known as the Blurred Library, was born in Brooklyn, New York, and raised by, quote, the weirdest quartet of individuals ever forced together for a common goal. She loves comic books, black science fiction, and despises small talk. She's a wife and mother of both the human and furry and feathered kind. She's active on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads, where she talks about all things QT BIPOC, speculative fiction, and books and comics. If you love science fiction, I highly encourage you to visit her blog at theblurredlibrary.com. Now,
Aw.
the second half to this duo, Bree, as a reader, reviewer, creator, and interviewer, Bree consumes black science fiction and fantasy at an uncanny rate, so much so that she created Be Too Weird, a space for weirdos who enjoy and intentionally read sci-fi, and fantasy from BIPOC authors and she's and while also being on a mission to amplify those writers and indie publishers. She's originally from Texas but currently lives in California. And like me, she's new to comics and graphic novels but takes her passion seriously and has become the penultimate collector. You can see by both of their backgrounds. She's been making book content since 2020, and as I noted, created B2 to create that safe space. There, they also host book tours and for publishers who normally don't have the marketing budget. So, ladies, Keisha and Bree, welcome. Thank you for joining me here on Books and Bounty tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having
Thank
us.
you. Yes.
So I started following you. You know, the algorithms have been doing some magic for me here at Books and Bounty and getting me in front of folks. And so I guess they assumed as I kept posting and leading up to the series, I was telling folks about how I wanted to read more graphic novels, how I'm surrounded by them, considering my fella, he reads comic books and graphic novels. My teenager, like me, they read everything, but they are, I mean, even more so to me, they read everything. So I
That's
thought,
awesome.
I wanted to give it a try and challenge new things. So you see here, my growing pile and collection, not
That's
like
a good
Nice.
yours,
start.
but
I was
it's
gonna
growing.
say that's a solid start.
Right? That is.
So it's growing. So I want to start. I have a few questions to help us facilitate the conversation. I sent them to you earlier, but I really want this to flow as naturally as possible. So if we don't get to all of them, I'm sure there'll be plenty moments for us in the future to talk again. So the first question I ask all of my guests: when did your love for storytelling and reading begin? And where are you? Sorry about that. When, why, and how did your love of storytelling or reading begin? Keisha, I'll start with you.
Mm. So I was not a good reader growing up. I've I talk about how like I was a hooked on phonics kid.
Hmm.
Very smart, but it just reading was not clicking. And in New York, we had these citywide tests. forget what they were called, CBT, something like that. And I like you had to get like 0 out of 100 or something, and I got like a 98 on the math, and like bombed the reading. And they had this whole meeting to determine whether or not I was going to move on to the fourth grade. And my mom had like basically begged them and was like, nah, she's smart, it's just something didn't happen. So they ended up letting me go to the fourth grade, but my mom forced me to do hooked on phonics.
Your
And
mom?
I remember starting with like, I don't know if anybody in the audience ever remembers the little box that it came with the tape deck, and you had to flip through all the things. I might be aging myself here,
Oh,
but
we're all working together
but
here.
I remember going from the first one where it was just like one sentence on it to, by I'm gonna say fifth grade, doing the ones with like full on essays and then having to write an essay myself after it. And those were my weekends for like a solid 2 years. And I learned then that stories helped me understand people in a way I could not understand them before. So,
That's a lot. Let
so
me write that down to clip.
right, like it helped me understand people because people were always foreign to me. And so reading helped me do that. And it helped me do that while also escaping.
Hmm.
So it's just something that I've always done to this day. I read voraciously. I don't even post everything I read.
Hmm.
Yes, that
So,
that
right?
part.
I don't even post everything I read. I'm just always constantly reading something. So that's long story short, that's why.
And Brie, what about you? Where did your spark for reading and storytelling begin?
Yeah, mine came from my mom, hands down. She was one of those type of people who always had like the mass market paperback size Harlequin romances with like Fabio on the cover with his taco meat out in her purse,
That
or
was my Aunt Jenny.
yeah, yeah. She always had some type of book with her, and her thing was like, if I'm reading, you should be reading. So you always had something for me to read. Even like just at breakfast, reading the back of the cereal box type of thing. We were reading everything and making a game of it. And she's like always was nice with the voices and giving it context. So she would like stop and be like, "Oh, if it was you
Screw.
in that situation, what would you do? Or how would you feel if this happened?" So we always just had that like bonding opportunities anytime there was an opportunity to read or anytime there was a story. That was her thing, like put yourself in that story and think about how you would be. So I it was just always like I look up to her. She's always reading. I want to always be reading. So like it's not well known in these bookstagram streets, but I used to be like a historical fiction girly, like all those like Dear Diary type of things. Like that was my
Mm.
jam until I got into like Goosebumps and Animorphs and all of that. So I was always that girl, like, buying up all of the books all the time. My mom's the youngest of 10 kids, and so, like, this is Imma age myself too since you did the same thing. You know how Scholastic used to send you home with, like, the little paper flimsy thing with all of the
Things,
books
the
so you could
wonderful things.
place your order or
Yes.
whatever?
Those.
Hmm.
She would be like, "Circle what you want, and then we'll figure out what you're gonna get." I would circle everything and be like, "I need $50." And, books were cheap back then, so it was like, that was asking for a lot, and she would be like, "I'm giving you this much. You're gonna have to ask your aunties," and the auntie team is solid. They'd be like, "Let that baby read. I'll give you some money." So everybody else was like getting their stickers, erasers, and Ferrari posters at the Scholastic Book Fair, and I was like balling out. So yeah, just from young and like the reason why I made that face when you said fourth grade, Keisha, is because like that's where it really overhauled. Like I will never forget this woman, my fourth grade teacher, Miss Granzella. She was the OG, triple OG, and she had
Mm.
like a behavior system in the class and was like, if you stay on blue the whole week, then you get a prize from the box. But if you choose the book, you can get two books. And I'm just like, that's just good math. I'm gonna get two things for my trouble. So
Right?
And
So
I would always do that. She thought I wasn't reading them. And then she was like, if you come back and write me a paragraph about the book that you read, you can get another book. So I was like gaming that system heavy, like thinking that's what it is. But really, she's just like, oh, she's an avid reader. Let me just encourage her. So yeah, we just been eating it up. Avid reader since I was old enough to read, period.
shout out to the moms and aunties.
Yes.
Yes, because for me, I had an aunt too, and I guess we're all around the same age now that we know. Like, so I had an aunt who was obsessed with romance novels, and I'd be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, why do you read that trash?" And then like
Yeah.
now, but like then it was just like she read, and so I read. If that was their pastime when it was like a quiet moment, even on vacation. So that would be my pastime. If we're on the plane, I'm reading a book. So and then what's so funny though is that my child is highly into the romance genre. And I tease her about this all the time. I mean, from
Aw.
the cheesiest to the coziest to the wildest, all of it. And I think it's hilarious. Um, I have a queer child, a transgender child. And so for them to now be able to one find more black voices even in the romance space, and now
Mhm.
there's so many more, not as much as there should be, but they can find like queer romance stories now and black
Yep.
queer romance stories now. Rise of self-publishing and indie publishers and you know self-proclaimed writers and authors, it's been really really great for them. So shout out to the aunties and moms motivating, keeping avid
Yes.
readers in the flow of things, keeping them funded.
Facts. Facts. And don't make fun
Right.
of that baby for loving romance. That means they have a pure and open heart.
You know what? And they do.
Mm.
Thank you for saying that, Bree. But it's something.
Yeah.
You know, it's still a chuckle. We're still chuckling.
We're still chuckling. We're still like it is definitely a chuckle over here. Like I'm like just I should just get them like an old fashioned series of those Fabio books. Be like, here, read this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Listen.
if they're watching. If they're not watching,
Mm-hmm.
that might show up under the Christmas tree as a joke. But okay, so um, other questions that I have for you both. Keisha, I found the 12th annual Black Comic Book Festival where you were in conversation with a few other panelists.
Yes.
And one of your questions was, what was your canon event that made you want to advocate for representation in literature and media? So, as emerging and impactful advocates yourselves, what was your canon event to spark your mission with your individual platforms? And then we can get into the Pink Riot comic show.
Um, it's crazy because everybody talks about how whenever they start with Bookstagram or Book Talk or any of those spaces, they started in mainstream, those mainstream ones, and then they were like, "Whoa, this isn't for me," and then, moved over. I can safely say that was never my experience. I
Me too.
He's lucky.
right, like I remained firm in the fantasy BIPOC space. Even when I went to Book Talk, did not have that experience at all. I never, to this day, I haven't like seen those videos. So I'm gonna say it's always been there, and I think it's because um my route to intentional reading in that way was there before I got online. So when I went back to college, because I got like 7 years between my junior and senior year, when I went back to school, my school was like in its renaissance era where it was renovating everything, specifically like the curriculums and stuff. And I was in the English department, and the English department was like the students were demanding things of the English department. Like, y'all need to
Yes.
put in more inclusive writers. And so, my senior year, and I'm so happy I went back so many years later because it was a completely different experience. But
Mhm.
the kids were like, now we need to see more Black kids. We go to an HBCU. This is what we expect. So, they completely renovated the curriculum by the time my senior year came around. And so, that 1 year, I was blown away. This is where I learned about Moon Girl. This is where I read Morrison for the first time. This is where, I had so many black writers that I was like, okay, I need more of this because I am like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Like I was reading all of that, so I was like, all right, I need more of this. And within like a couple of months of going back, that's where I found Butler. And then from there on, I was like, I can't do anything else. So I went into the online spaces already wanting this and requiring this of everybody around me. So I'm happy I didn't go through that whole thing.
Well, what about you, Bree? You seem like you went through maybe the opposite experience.
Yeah, I had like there were some fluctuations in my experience a bit because I too went to an HBCU. I went to Spelman, and I joke about like how awesome it was being in that environment because I worked at Victoria's Secret while I was in school, and when I would go to work, I'd be like, "Oh, that's right, I forgot about white people." Um, but at the time, like, I wasn't really reading for fun and that sort of thing. And then when I got back into reading, it was kind of just like, oh yeah, whatever. I pick up casually, but I wasn't reading as nearly as much. And my cousin is has been like my book bestie since we were little. Like, so when I would go visit family, we would be the ones, they'd be outside playing freeze tag and we're like, we're gonna be over here with our books. Anyways, she recommended the Children of Blood and Bone to me and was all hyped because that series that shall not be named was a big part of our childhood together,
Yes. Oh,
and it was being compared to that. And I was like, "Oh, this is so cool." And so we did like the pre-orders and we were going to like buddy read it together long distance cuz at the time I was still in Texas and she was here. And I went to work. I like left work on my lunch to go to Barnes and Noble to pick up my pre-order and came back and one of my colleagues was like making fun of me heavily for being pressed about getting this book and whatever, and I was telling her about it and she like kind of checked me like, "Oh yeah, well I don't really read that much because I don't see a lot of stories, the type of stories that I like to read with characters that look like me." And I was like ready to charge her up about it, like put on my whole Spellman hat and stand on a soapbox and go there. But I was like, I can't really go there because I don't have a lot of recs for her in this moment because I've just been reading whatever. And so I like intentionally started looking for Black and African science fiction and fantasy stories. And at the time, the only resource that I would have is like asking the internet and asking whoever at the bookstore. And if you don't know the right bookstores to go to, they're going to tell you the same 4 or 5 names or whatever's like
Mm,
popular at the time. So I was like trying to build my library while I had this like fire for reading again and was hitting walls left and right. And then I found the bookish space online and it was like, "Oh, this is cool. I can get into this way." And tried joining book clubs and stuff like that there in that space, but found that I'm very much a genre reader. Like if it doesn't, the people in my book club make fun of me because I say this all the time. If it doesn't have magic or aliens in it, I probably don't want to read it. If we're being real.
yep.
And I found that like the people who looked like me that I was coming across in the bookish space were more so reading like literary fiction and all that type of stuff or nonfiction. And that just wasn't my bag. And I tried it and it wasn't working. So I just decided after some months in the bookish space, like I'm only going to read books by authors of color and I'm only going to read the genre that I want to read. And then I started finding more people who were feeling that. And one of my close friends, Kai, she's like an OG in the book club. I was like, I should start my own book club. She's like, yeah, you should. You've been talking about it. And I was like, well, what if nobody comes? And she was like, well, I'll come. I was like,
that's
well, there you go. I don't have no excuse now. So yeah, it came from that because like at the time, all you see in the book, well, the majority of what you see until you're able to train your algorithm, like if you're just searching books and whatever, all you're gonna see are the Akotar people and the Colleen Hoover
Hmm.
people and people who read casually and pretty much just read whatever Oprah's talking about.
Right.
And I remember coming across at the time, oh, what was that? What was that book? Oprah's book that she picked was like American Dirt or something like that, and it
Mm.
was, I think that's what it was.
Keisha said it
Either
best.
way, the controversy behind it was that it was supposed to be like a Mexican story, but it wasn't written by a
Right,
Mexican
right.
person. And I just remember being like, "Dang, we really have to do our due diligence because otherwise people are just going to go with whatever everybody else tells them and we'll never get to our stories that are actually our stories." Like I even remember going to like bookstores and looking up, you look at all those like, oh, 10 of the best black fantasy stories or 10 of the best African fantasy stories. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to pick up whatever's on this list and read that. And I found the David trilogy and inhaled the first book of that, and then was big mad when I got to the end of the book and seen this was a whole white woman. So it was like, nah, we got to champion these stories so that you don't get like cover fished or list fish. So
Oh,
long story, but it was a process.
I had a sort of combined experience between like the two of you. So I went to a predominantly white institution. I went to the penultimate primary white institution, UVA, in Charlottesville, Virginia. And my first experience with a professor, I was writing. I try to make this quick. I was writing an essay on Beowulf, and first of all, I was
Mm.
just like totally bored. I was English. I knew I was going to
Yes.
be an English
It's
language
boring.
teacher,
Yes.
and like we have to read all these greats because they're old. And I'm like, they're not good though. Like
Yeah.
They're
they're not
not.
Right.
They're
good.
not.
Right.
And as a black girl from Baltimore in a UVA environment, I was just so like not beyond the culture shock. It was just I was disassociating from it all, right? And so I said, I can't fail though. How can I make this interesting to me? So I wrote an essay and compared Beowulf's mom to like the stereotype at the time of the welfare queen. And
Mm.
Okay. Period.
yes. And so you see the reaction y'all got, but my fair skinned instructor, my white instructor, uh, almost failed me. And I'm
Wow.
like, oh, I knew I'm a good writer. Like, you know, with all the mechanism, you can't fail me because your opinions are different. You only can fail
Right.
me if I
If the
don't do the
argument isn't
assignment.
solid.
Is it
Right.
Right.
solid? And I knew I had a solid argument. So that's the one and only time I went to the dean and I got my grade changed. Um,
Period. As
yeah.
you should.
Right.
And that's when I realized that like no one's going to put it in front of me. And I had a wonderful professor, Deborah McDowell, who is a well-known literary critic, professor, academic, and especially of the Harlem Renaissance. And I mean, she has essays in Zora Neale Hurston's books, and so she just like being in her class was just like I need this all the time. I have to be intentional about who I pick, who I try to write for, who I align myself with, and so years later when I started Books and Bounty, that's what it was all about. It's like I couldn't on Book Talk, I couldn't really find my space. Books and Bounty is primarily an editorial production and content development company, but I knew I needed an online presence. And Book Talk, it was either Black Book Talk was all urban reading, and then regular Book Talk is inundated with like romance and stuff or whatever's trending at the time, like you said. So it's again our age group, the way we found our interest. I'm finding that a lot of bookish people um, creating spaces for Black people, Black authors, BIPOC authors have similar stories when it comes to their spark for why they're doing it. So kudos to you both, and I hope you continue with that intentional reading and amplification.
And
Thank you.
likewise.
Yeah.
Um, so outside, so the next question I have, this is also coming from the Black Comic Festival. There is a series on free writing, finding the liberation through literature. And so, coming off of a weary election season, us as Black women, we are quite tired. What can we do?
Sad.
Tired. What can we do to remind ourselves, encourage, and uplift writers and readers to continue to put that pen to paper?
Mm.
You first, Bri.
Listen, my thing since I've started being in this space has always been that, radical joy and radical self-care are a revolution in and of themselves because every space we go we're expected to hold everybody else by the hand and explain it to them and make it plain for them and make it palatable for them. and we give and we give and we give and we give. So my whole platform, my whole everything that I do is always based around like feeding my joy and letting that be an example for other people. Like you don't have to conform to do that, and you don't have to educate. It's not your responsibility to make other people do the work or to do the work for them. If I feel like if I show up as my most authentic self doing those things for myself, it will encourage people to want to lean into the things that I'm passionate about. So to me, that's just always been it. Like I do a lot of author interviews, and I tend to ask them what their like origin story for their stories were, or what got them into writing and whatever. And more often than not, their response is something to the effect of, I didn't see myself in those stories, so I wrote the story that represented me the way that I wanted to. And I know that there's some more prolific quote
You know, I think we're
that
all
I could
thinking about the
reference
Toni
for that.
Morrison quote about if it's not
Yeah,
Yes,
like it
yes.
exactly.
hasn't been.
I didn't want to butcher it, but
Yeah.
it's the same vibes.
Mhm.
Like write the story that you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that the best way that I can encourage people who are inclined to do that is to celebrate their stories every opportunity that I get. That's why I do those author interviews.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter like if it's a popular book or something like that. If it's by a BIPOC author and the story seems interesting to me, or seems like something that I wish I would have seen when I started my journey here, I'm going to do my best to amplify it, be that me doing the interview or my book club hosting a Insta tour for it for free. Like we don't charge for those things for that very reason, because more often than not, they don't have the funding for those types of things. There's been lots of situations where we go through the process and they want the author to pay for the review copies to send to the tour participants. So it's just like when you see both sides of the spectrum of like the support, all I can do is, like I said, share my joy and amplify those stories and fill those gaps where it's feasible for me. And my all the people in my book club, they're like, "Oh yeah, we would have loved to share this story anyway, and we're gonna get a free copy. Oh yeah, we're gonna scream about this so
Exactly.
that other people know." So
Yeah.
yeah.
And Keisha, I'm going to ask you one final question about, how you guys got to this point and your impact, and then we're going to get into some more of the fun, juicy stuff with reads and recommendations. So, Keisha, you are a mom, and I'm
Mhm.
interested to know about how your reading and storytelling shows up at home, and how that also contributes to your advocacy outside the home.
Um, this is probably a long answer.
Go ahead, feel free.
So reading is everywhere in my house. And with each kid, it's been a little different because I don't believe that every kid learns the same way. Therefore, you gotta tweak for every single kid. So, in our household, books have always been there. There's always been some version of a story time, whether it's in the morning, at night, what have you. Um, Something that I guess I'm saying it in online now, but something I always used to tell parents whenever I would tutor, because I used to be a private tutor and whatnot. It's like, put the captions on your TV, turn the volume down.
Yeah.
Get the kids to read everything. Everything in my house is labeled, not just because everybody is neurodivergent and it's just easier, but like, you know, you learn where things are, you learn what they're called and stuff. Like it's just easier to associate that way.
Well, that was
Um,
my first introduction. The first thing I remember, and even I'll go back to my family with these stories. The first thing that I did when I started reading was read signs. They used to call me
mhm,
the go-go baby because mom and I, we were always out doing stuff. So the first thing I needed to do was learn where the heck I was going.
yeah,
And that's what I did. I started reading signs everywhere. It got on my parents' nerves, my mom's nerves, but that's was my first thing. So labels, and
yeah,
I said, like it also teaches, I think, children that reading is a skill. Like it's informative. It's
it
a
is.
life skill. You use it to
It is.
inform yourself, to teach yourself. If people aren't around that can't give you an answer, you can figure out on your own. So yeah,
Absolutely.
keep going.
absolutely. Like, I'm a firm believer that education is liberation. And so as my kids get older, I introduce more to them. So like I start with comics. I don't start with like I go from picture books straight into comics, and
Mhm,
I've done that with every single kid. I find that it's easier to make the adjustment from picture books to like chapter books and all of that stuff.
mhm,
um and it's faster, so like I can figure out what genres they're into, because I'm only really spending a day or so on a book versus anything else. So with my kids I would go from a comic book to then a prose book or something. Like I'll just
mhm.
keep going back and forth, and that's how I make sure my kids are not getting overwhelmed by reading, because when you have early readers or reluctant readers, they're not always going to want to read those chapter books. So
Mhm,
I go back and forth between comics constantly. I still do it. This entire library is open to my older kids.
mhm, mhm,
So my 14-year-old, yeah, my 14-year-old has been digging into this entire library for like the
mhm.
last 2 years. I found out one day randomly, I was talking about Butler, and Z was like, "Oh, you mean the one who wrote Kindred?"
I know that made you
Found
feel
out
so good.
it did. But then also I was like, baby, you weren't supposed to touch that book right now.
Talk about it. Now we gotta talk about it.
Right.
Uh-huh,
No,
uh-huh.
but it has great conversations.
Yeah.
Like I'm able to now, like my kid goes through these books and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, and then we'll end up having great conversation about it. Right now, like the last book I put in front of one of my kids was The Goddess of Filth. And then my son, I just bought him another comic book cuz we're still trying to like work with him on his stamina in reading and whatnot. But yeah, I think I answered it. Basically, we are reading constantly. Um, oh, and another thing, bribing kids works. I don't care
Yes, it
what
does.
anybody says.
I'm one of those parents.
That part.
Yep, it works. Right now with my son, he has this thing where he reads for 25 minutes in the morning. I give him a star, and 10 stars gets him 10 Robux. So, you know, I
I think that's just
do
the
what you
Ooh,
need to
you
do.
right
went
thing,
down the Roblox road.
right?
I'm like
Absolutely.
doing everything I can to keep my son away from those types of games because I just know he about to be hitting me up. But I do the bribing system as well. When I go pick up my comics, I'm like, did you read the last ones that you got? Tell me what they were about. Okay, then you can get this many books when mommy goes to pick up her books. And it just goes from there. He's like, my son is awesomely autistic,
Mhm,
and
Same.
his reading journey has been varied. So we're like in that graphic novel place right now where he's like, okay, I can absorb this and not get bored and whatever. So
yes.
I'm pretty much like, you have to read for this period of time in order to earn your iPad time. So he's like, okay, I got to clock in if I want to get any screen time.
Yep.
So it's a give and take. He's
Hmm.
the way that he is right now, he uses echolalia, so he like repeats things and all that sort of thing. So he's like, we make jokes that he's going to be a great orator because he says everything. He doesn't read in his head at this phase.
Mhm.
So I'm like, I know he's reading because I can hear him. So that's the vibes. Yeah. Got to bribe him with something.
Hmm.
I, I think that's a great transition into sort of what this series, like what I have been learning about, and some of the really key things that I find important about graphic novels and comic books. And that some primary, if there's tons of research and literature out here on this, I highly encourage people to do a little quick Google search. It doesn't take long. But graphic novels have been proven to be not only a great introduction to young or reluctant readers, but they are more easily accessible, far more easily accessible than traditional novels, not just because of
Yeah.
different range in physical reading capabilities, but also because just by the nature of having a picture illustration, something graphic in front of you, and also tackling complex subjects or dangerous themes or being able to invoke complexity and empathy with situations can be done much more so in visual form sometimes than in narrative form. And I'm
Hmm.
finding that to be true in graphic novels, for example. I am not a nonfiction reader. This is something that I probably should be better at. But I
Same.
can read nonfiction in graphic novel form. So I have been tearing it up. I have a couple things in my to be read pile here. I don't know, where is it. Oh, it's actually in the ongoing the proper to be read pile, the one that's right by my chair. But this is by George Takai. The
Yeah, they
yeah,
call us enemy. Yeah.
uh-huh. And so that's in there. And I have another one somewhere. Messy Roots, which is a graphic memoir that the teenager recommended to put on the Reads and Rex list. And I think there's
Hmm.
one other one that I had, but I don't have it right here in front of me. So I think, I think that just proves the point, even anecdotally, as moms using Bri using, and Keisha using comic books and graphic novels to sort of transition and phase your children into reading. Um, is a great tip for all parents out there. If you
Oh
have
yeah.
reluctant readers, young readers that are transitioning, and for adults as well, I think it's a great change of pace to really hard novels back to back, a long novel. So right now, I think my reading schedule is going to be consist of probably a graphic novel, a short story collection, and then a traditional novel, and that's probably how I'll be able to keep my reading
Yeah.
steady.
And I think that's what's really cool reading in different mediums.
Mhm.
Like, I very rarely have reading slumps. Cause like
Yeah.
as soon as a novel's like, oh, this is too much, I'm immediately shifting to a comic. Like once I'm
Mm.
done with the comic, I might pick up a short story in here and there. Like I've never reading slumps, I cannot relate. Like
Yeah. Definitely same. There, it's a great kind of palate cleanser too if you're
hmm
transitioning in between tough stories or whatever, and they're bite sized. So like I think what some people experience when they're having a reading slump is obviously that like separation from great characters. If you read a good story or something kind of just takes you out of the mood, then you feel like, oh, I still didn't finish that book or something like that. But you can finish a comic book issue like nothing.
a
And
day.
then it's like, I finished this, like I can take on the next thing. So it's multi-layered, like
Hmm.
it's also there's something about we talk about color palettes quite a lot because if an artist or a colorist represents there's certain color palettes that just scratch my brain in a good way where I
That's
know
Robin
a quote. That's
Smith.
that's a
yeah.
great way to describe it because I've been sitting here giving my reviews about. I have some great color work artists here in the pile. Hannah
Mhm,
Templar, Laura
mhm,
Perez is a Spanish creator,
yeah,
and that's it. It's getting that itching it in the right way. That's a good one.
yeah.
Robin Smith has my heart. Her color palettes are just so soothing.
That's the right word, soothing. So it's like no matter what you're reading or not reading, that you'll always enjoy something like that or something that fits in that mold.
Hmm.
And I'm finding those things out for like my son too and like what he's reading. Like he's more inclined to read something that is similar to color palettes or to styles that he's read before.
Really?
Yeah.
See, with King, I found out that he prefers nonfiction.
Mm,
Like, yeah, nonfiction graphic novels or something that's like creative nonfiction.
Mhm.
mm,
Because um there's something with like implied with I guess regular fiction, when you're dealing with characters and their emotions and stuff, like he struggles with that a lot.
Mhm.
So
yeah.
like if it's something that's fairly literal on the face, he'll eat it up. And there is this graphic novel that he loved. It's not written by a BIPOC author, and I'm like, but
Can't win them
uh,
all.
right? But it's called King of Crows, and it's a story about a crow,
Yeah.
and it's a genius, cute graphic novel, and it teaches you about crows. I know so much. about these animals because of this this graphic novel.
Yeah,
Like, but yeah, it's just really cool, like seeing that.
yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to get into. We have about 5, 10 more minutes, or you could stay longer, however, guys, you however you want to do it. But I always like to. I have two things I want to end with. First, I want to get into your bookish recommendations and reads and recs. So things that you're looking to get to before the end of the year, some of your favorites from this year, and then perhaps
Mhm.
anything that should be on pre-order for 2025. So this time, Bri, let's start with you. What are your read and recs from 2024 transitioning into the new year?
I'm a storm girly, so I'm obsessed with the current storm run. And on the flip side of that, very much looking forward to Storm Life Dream. It's a storm anthology that's coming out in February next year. It's celebrating 50 years of Storm comics, Storm in comics, and the anthology is all Black creators, all Black writers, and the short stories are about Storm in her different phases throughout the 50 years that she's existed as a character. So super excited about that. I know one that both Keisha and I are super excited about is the hardcover edition of Far
Yes.
Sector.
Mhm.
My favorite author of all time is N.K. Jemisin, and her foray into comics with Far Sector was everything. I like anybody that will tell you my favorite theme in a comic is for it to be Black girl set in space. This has that. It has aliens. It's giving you semi superhero, semi like detective
Mystery.
noir type of
Mhm.
vibes. But it's very well done because it's Auntie NK. Like she's gonna get it done every time. There's these awesome like Black pop culture and history quotes and references all throughout it. It's literally right behind me because it's one of my favorites, but she's finally getting a hardcover that also is coming out early next year. So, and if you want to get one that has a signed book plate, go to sistersci-fi.com. We love Sister Sci-Fi. She
Mhm.
is it's a Black woman owned online bookstore that centers Black and Indigenous stories. What else? You're asking for recommendations or just things that I've read this year or both or
Both recommendations. It doesn't have to be anything. It can be something you haven't read yet, of course. Anything
okay,
you're
yeah,
looking
I'd
forward to.
say
Mm-hmm.
the thing I typically recommend the same uh I typically recommend the same comics to people who are just getting into comics. I have a couple of approaches. One is like lean into authors that you might have read before in their graphic novel adaptations or something that
Mhm.
they've like dipped their toe in. So I love House of Whispers by Nalo Hopkinson. That has to do with dream magic. There's 3 volumes of it. The art is very stylized, very cool. It has like some African folklore, but also like Creole like folklore inspired characters in it, and it has a dream magic system that I love. Um, we are going to be talking about the Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents graphic novel adaptations
Yes.
Mhm.
and within
Excited
the new
about
year. So I'm encouraging, yeah, there you go.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
encouraging everyone who will listen to run and go copy your copy from Sister Sci-Fi as well if you haven't already, because we'll be talking about that in the new year. So
And it's
um
such good content in the back, curated
yeah.
content in the back of this book. This has come up. I actually just recommended this last week. I have Ken adaptation of Duffy and John Jennings of Kindred here.
It's a great adaptation
Yeah.
of it.
Y
It
yeah,
does
it
a great
really
job
is.
with
So
that.
any of those type of adaptations are normally how I try to get people to lean into it. So that
Mhm.
and Far Sector are those. And then on the flip side, I like to just recommend things that I really enjoyed when I first got into comics. So one of those is it's called Sleepless, and your teen might enjoy it because it's like romance-ish vibes, but it's also fantasy. This is a special edition of it, but it's by Layla Del Duca and Sarah Vaughn, and it's like a fantasy, but it's a black princess, and it's called Sleepless because the knight who is assigned to protect her is a part of this order that don't sleep. So it's an awesome story. Another one that I always like to recommend to people is Space Bandits. It's two women, one of them is a black woman. They're both like, one is a part of a gang and of thieves, and they betray her and she goes to prison in space. Another one is a woman who is like Bonnie and Clyde style with her boyfriend, and she gets betrayed and she goes to the same prison, and they both decide we're busting out of here and we're going to get our revenge on everybody who wronged us. And it's just such shenanigans, and it's like 80s fashion stylized, but
That
it's just
sounds
a
like
good time all around. And then I'd say my other favorite thing to recommend to people, just because I loved it when I started in comics, is Tartarus by
Mm,
Johnny Christmas.
yes.
There's 2 volumes of it. It's another black woman in space type of vibes, but that's one of those ones where the art style and the color palette scratched my brain in the absolute best way. Um, and it's a little different. It's not like what you typically think of when you think of, comics or graphic novels or whatever. It's a good time. I've been like low key begging him in his DMs, please give us more in this world because I love it so much. But yeah, those are my things that I typically read to people who are just getting into graphic novels and comics to kind of see what their vibes are, and that it can tell me a lot, like, what they did and didn't enjoy. I'd say the last one is probably, Monstrous by,
Mm,
um,
Marjorie Lou.
Marjorie Liu and Sana Takada.
Mm.
There are That one is a continuing run currently. I would knock all of my pops over if I tried to grab it for you right now, but there's 2 book hardcover books that are like compilations of the several volumes, and the new book of that should be coming out within the new year as well, so that's another one to look forward to, book 3 of that. But the art style and that is just so lush and decadent, and like it's all the way through the story, and it gives you like sapphic relationships and talking cats and different worlds and mermaids and demons, and it's just, I don't know what else you would want in a fantasy story, it's beautiful. So yeah, those are my recs. I can go on and on, but
Right.
go ahead, Keisha.
Um, all right, so I'm gonna start with the DCYA line of comics. So that's like Nubia, Row One, the newer one that's gonna be coming out in the fall. Um, Lamar Giles, who also wrote The Getaway, the novel. He has one in there with Static and Milestone Comics called Up All Night. That comic is hilarious. The main character, one of the characters is like stealing everything, and it becomes like just a whole night of shenanigans. I enjoyed that one so much.
Yeah, lots of
Um,
fun cameos in that too.
yeah, oh, it's great. Um, I have a list. So excellence.
keep going.
I love this one so much. There's father-son relationships. Father is in this organization, the son is trying to be in it, and then the son is like, things happen where the son can't get into it, and he is on the run. And there's 2 volumes to this. This one is very, very good. I'm probably doing a terrible job at summarizing it.
No, you're doing great.
You're doing a great job.
Blackword is one of the books I read this past year,
Mm.
and it's one of my favorite graphic novels of all time. It's about this group of Black and queer kids who are trying to what is it? They're trying to save their zine. Um, they're trying to make zines, and like they do this whole organization. They're trying to fundraise for it. The art is so cute and simple and cool. This filled my heart with a lot of joy. Like just seeing a bunch of awkward Black kids working together and, trying to achieve a goal. Um, I have Bunt. There's a
Mm,
lot from First Second that's really good.
yeah.
This one is hilarious. Uh, it speaks about college education, gentrification, and like a college's role in that, which
Mm,
is really interesting. The main character is awesome. She has two supportive moms who are really strict. Basically, she gets into this art school that she's been wanting to get into. They put her face on the cover and marketing and everything. She's supposed to get the scholarship. She gets to school, loses the scholarship for whatever reason.
Mm.
And she has to figure out a way to pay for school without telling her moms. And she finds this loophole saying that if she can get together a sports team and they win a game, they all get athletic scholarships. So she decides to create this softball team of all these artists.
And has
And
she
they are
played softball before?
no, none of them have. Only one or two of them have. The rest of them have never touched any kind of
Wow.
like sport equipment before. It is hilarious. It is hilarious, but still insightful. I encourage everyone to read this one. I like black exploitation, and this one is a very inclusive, updated version of black exploitation. I know that there's a lot of I get a lot of pushback when I say black exploitation, but this one specifically, I
fine line. It's a fine line you gotta walk.
it is, but this one is so there's a non-binary like this one right here, they're non-binary, and when I say the shenanigans they get into, they are a James Brown cover band. They are traveling the galaxy, and they get into so much stuff. I cackled from beginning to end with this one. And it's indie, like it's a hilarious comic. I can't say anything less. Um a comic that I always tell people to get into, especially if they've never read comics
Mhm.
before. Um I don't like putting people strictly into sci-fi fantasy and all of that. I kind of want to see if you can actually like read the comic and get through the panels and all of that stuff. So starting with Watch Day Diaries is a fantastic comic. It's short stories and you're dealing with these black girls who are just living life. I consider it like a slice of life. Um where you get them and the things that they are going through, and it all centers around their hair, their friendship, and dealing with mental health together. So very much enjoy this one. This one is done by Robin Smith and Jamila Rouser,
Mhm.
and the artwork is just so calming and soothing.
Yeah.
Very healing.
Yeah.
um you already have Weirdo,
I
which
do.
is
I just picked it up. This is going in my son's
every kid
my
needs to have this
my
comic.
bonus boy's Christmas list. This is going on to him. He almost saw it the other day because I had him on live the other day reading a book, another graphic novel. I had him reading Mr. Smarty Pants, all nuts,
Yeah.
and
Oh.
See, yeah, every
it's
kid needs to have this comic book
this
in their library. It's amazing. It takes such care talking about heavy topics that deal with kids, specifically kids who feel like they're isolated and they're dealing with depression, and like how to find your way back into community with people. And I feel like every kid needs that.
and the,
Um
and the
I
hair.
love
The hair in this book is exquisite.
yes.
Tony does a
Also,
great
the
job.
author and creator is such a gem. He's a
You
sweetheart.
Yeah.
need to follow him, guys. Tony Weaver Jr. on social media platforms. He's a character. He
Yes.
sort of I know he just stalked Two Chains so he could be a part of the toy drive that we're doing.
Seen that.
We saw that one.
Yeah.
That was funny.
Next up, I have this is a historical fiction, Queenie, Godmother of Harlem. It talks about the woman who ran Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance,
Mhm.
and this one is done in black and white. And I enjoyed this one so much. I didn't think I would, but enjoyed it very very much.
Mm. Abrams
Ju-
comics art doesn't miss. The
yeah,
Megascope titles are all good.
yeah. And my favorite out of all of the Megascope comics is Black Star. I like hating characters. So both characters characters in here, you're not gonna like either one of them. There's nothing, you know, they are very complex and nuanced individuals, and it's really cool seeing these two people you do not like
Mm.
fight for survival and see who is going to get off planet and actually save themselves. So like you end up just being there for the thrill of the chase.
I
The
like I like characters that I can cuss at.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I love Victor Laval. So Victor Laval's The Destroyer is inspired by Frankenstein, and he changes this to then become um it's a mom who is a scientist and her son is killed by police, and she uses nanotechnology to bring him back, and then you're dealing like with the repercussions of that. So this one I really enjoyed, especially after reading Frankenstein and seeing like the similarities between the two stories. And then this one is about a little girl whose dad is a scientist as well, but he's in space. And then he drops her and this teddy bear back on Earth because Earth has been, destroyed. And these two have to figure out a way to save the planet.
It's such a
So,
beautiful story.
yeah, yeah, wonderful. Hold on, I don't want to take up too much time. Only got four more.
Only four more.
Only four more. Okay. I love retellings, and Prince of Cats is amazing. The art is so weird but so
Yeah.
cool.
So good.
This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but it's told through the lens of Tybalt, a side character. So it is so cool.
Mm.
Like I feel
Is
like
that
it,
back in print? You out here giving Rex that they can't get anymore?
stop it, really?
I thought so. It's a good one though.
It is okay. It's
They
been
may
a
be
while
even
since I bought.
and also when out of print's book, check the author's website because you may be able to buy a print on demand. So,
That part.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, hold on. So now let me change this. No, Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer has like he
Yeah, and their new trades are coming out for that in the new year as well. So
yep,
you can pre-order them. They
yep,
have that
yep.
one and they have like the OG cover as well. So cuz that one was independently published and is now
Mhm.
getting traditionally published. So you can
Yep.
get both of those. Another awesome story. That's an excellent rec, Keisha.
Yes.
Title alone made me
And
write
then
that down in my personal list just now.
Yeah.
and you already have Abbott up there, so
Yes.
I'm gonna leave that alone. And then
And Bitterroot, that's a solid one.
right, Bitterroot is great. And then this one, nobody really talks about. The second volume, I was like, but the first volume was pretty cool.
Mm.
So Delver, um, this one is about this town. They end up getting like this portal to another dimension that has been popping up all over the world. And a lot of adventurers go into this portal and they come back with a lot of gold and money and jewels and stuff, but it's very dangerous. So her little town ends up getting one. And you see the parallels with um gentrification, globalism, and all of these different bad things that happen to small communities once, big corporations come in and take over. But it's done in a very fantastical way. So I enjoyed this first volume. It's really cool, really interesting. And that's all I got right now.
Well, that was plenty. And that's exactly what I wanted you guys to do tonight to sort of fill out the end of our graphic novel reads and recommendation list. A reminder to those listening on TikTok right now, make sure you are following Books and Bounty on Twitch and join the Bookish Brigade Discord server because that automatically enters you a chance. It automatically enters you into any of our good bookish giveaways. That's including you too as well. So you guys can enter to win. The next winner which I think, if all goes right with my spreadsheet and getting things out of the Beyonce boot, that's my pick it out of a hat. I have a sparkly boot that I picked the winner out of.
Yes.
But that winner will be able to pick a book from or read from any of the Reads and Recs from the graphic novel series. So I'll be posting
Nice.
your Reads and Recs as part of the list and updates for the series tomorrow. And Last but not least, when I Googled Pink Riot, is that an idea of what it meant? I've seen it before. It's been discussed. We are familiar. If you claim the title of feminist, I'm sure you understand it and have at least come across the hashtag before. When I Googled it, Google AI's search returned back the definition that pink riot typically refers to a movement or expression of rebellion or activism that embraces the color pink, which signifies a positive, empowering, and joyful stance against societal norms, particularly in the context of female empowerment or LGBTQ plus rights, where pink can be reclaimed from its traditional feminine association, riot representing a strong and passionate uprising against the status quo. So, I asked you in this notes, do you think that would be an accurate definition? And I think considering the conversation that we've had, how you came to start your interest in reading and how you started the Pink Riot show, I think it's a pretty hits close to home. But what do you think about that AI driven definition?
Yeah, I got it right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
pretty spot on. Yeah, wanting to embrace like both sides of who, well,
Mhm.
the two core sides of who we are as
Mhm.
readers and as women and creators in the space. So, yeah, that was pretty spot on, I
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, I like that.
Right?
Well, tell everyone as we say goodbye. Tell everyone again. Thank you so much for being here, Bri and Keisha, co-hosts of the Pink Riot Comic Show. Tell everybody how they can find you and when they can watch you live.
Well, you can find Bree at Bree's Bookish, and you can find me at the Blur Library, and together you can find us at Pink Riot Comic Show on all socials. You know, when we post, we post. Uh, but we definitely you can catch us on our live shows every Thursday, 5 p.m. PT, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we are always there every Thursday. We are on Twitch, we are on YouTube, and we are looking to be on other platforms, in the upcoming year.
Yeah, and if you're looking for more recs that are like in a specific category or have an idea of something that you like or whatever, just drop a comment to us because we love
Yeah.
sharing recs during our lives, and we will pull up a few just for you if you make the time to comment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again, Keisha and Bree, the Pink Riot Comic Show. Until next time, thank you again for turning the page with Books and Bounty. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you for having us.
Later. Thank
Bye.
you.